Hello, in this section of the tutorial we're going to learn how to use this calculator to graph sequences. And when we call sequences, we're talking about mathematical sequences. And so, if you haven't studied this before in math, if you don't know what a sequence is, then it's something that you'll usually get into when you get into the latter part of an algebra class and maybe an algebra 2 class. A sequence is basically a list of numbers. Literally, that's all it is. It could be, when you were in third grade and you had the problem on a worksheet, where it had, 2, 4, 6, blank, 10, and you had to fill in the blank. Well, you were looking at a sequence of numbers, and you were asked to fill in the blank. You were using your, brain to figure out the pattern and to fill in the blank for the number. And so a mathematical sequence is similar. It's similar to a function in that usually, a function is f of x, and we stick in values of x. And then we get values of f of x, the function that we get back, y. In other words, you can call it y. And we plot those on a graph, or we can make a table. Well, in a sequence, when you're talking about sequences, the independent variable is not x. We usually call it n. The independent variable is usually called n. And we have a function usually that we define. And that function, so we might have, n squared, for instance. So we would plug in values of n and get n squared. But the difference between that and a function is that for functions, they're continuous. In other words, any value of x you want, you could put 1.795 in for x and calculate the function value y, or f of x at that point. But in sequences, you're only constrained to the whole numbers. 0 for n, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The numbers in between those whole numbers have absolutely no business belonging in when we're talking about sequences. So basically, you can sort of think of a sequence as like a function, except it's only defined at the whole numbers. So in some respects, it's simpler than a function and easier to calculate. But there are some differences, and we'll talk about that in a second. So basically, we're going to use this calculator to input sequences in here and show you how to plot them. You're going to find that it is almost exactly the same way to do it in this calculator as it was to plot our functions and to look at our functions. You're going to be able to use the table to look at values in a table form. You'll be able to graph them. You'll be able to zoom in and out. You'll be able to do basically almost all